in the last quarter of our public session, and I will just remind anyone who would like to provide public testimony at the end of our meeting, there still is an opportunity to sign up. It's looking like, based on our schedule currently, the public testimony will start approximately at 4:15, but we still are relatively on track, so I appreciate everyone's patience. If I could ask panel members to join us at the front, and we'll start with our next presentation. And this is a presentation that was requested by the panel at its pre-season meeting. And this is a presentation on the Tay River Chinook Salmon Restoration Project. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Brian Mercer from Metla Environmental, who will be here presenting on this topic as requested by the panel. So good afternoon, Mr. Mercer, and welcome.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve has said, my name's Brian Mercer, and I work with Metla Environmental. We concentrate mostly on salmon stock assessment and enhancement projects in the Yukon River and on the transboundary rivers as well. And today I'll try and make it as brief as I can. We'll give a presentation on the Tay River Chinook Salmon Access Project that we've been involved with the last 2 years. We're working with Selkirk First Nation on this project, and I just want to point out as well that I'm not representing Selkirk First Nation, and the views that I present in this presentation will be ours only. And I don't want to claim that any of the viewpoints are necessarily those of SFN. This picture that you see in the slide is a confluence of the Tay River and Pelly River. Town of Faro is approximately 50 kilometers off upstream to the right, and Pelly Crossing approximately 150 kilometers downstream. The Tay River is located in south central Yukon, approximately 170 nautical miles north of Whitehorse, and as the map shows, east of Pelly Crossing and Carmacks. The Tay River is remote in that there's no road access to any part of the Tay River. There's no industrial activity in the watershed, no placer mining. It's the third largest tributary of the Pelly River at just over 3,800 square kilometers, about 195 river kilometers from confluence to the headwaters at Tay Lake, and with a mean gradient of approximately 2.3 meters per kilometer. The traditional territories of Selkirk First Nation cover the lower half of the Tay River approximately, and the Ross River Dene Council traditional territory is in the eastern half. The town of Faro, as you see, is the closest town to the watershed, and I'll just pointing this out because we'll talk a little bit about the Faro Mine Reclamation Project later on. The Faro Mine, the historic Faro Mine operations occurred just about 10 kilometers north of Faro at the headwaters of Rose Creek and Anvil Creek. I'll put this down. There's access to the Tay is limited by riverboat. You can get down to the confluence. It's somewhat difficult to get up to the identified barrier that we have shown here is where the barrier is. Other than that, it requires float plane to the lakes and the headwaters. There's a small lake here, too small to show on the map, that we were able to access to get to the lower Tay, but other than that, access limited to a helicopter or float plane. We do have a little bit of water discharge data dating back from 1990 through 1995. It's typical of most central Yukon systems with maximum discharges during spring freshet and then very low flows in the winter time and dropping down into the late fall. Of interest may be the flows that are seen here. This is max and min, and this is just the 1993 flow. And from mid-July through mid-August, we did see in this 5 years of data quite a variation in discharge rates when we would expect Chinook to be entering into the system. I'll just give a little bit of background how we got involved in the looking at the TAA as an enhancement candidate. Back in 2002 through 2004, we were involved with a radio telemetry study that was initiated by John Eiler and with the National Marine Fisheries Service in the U.S. This radio telemetry study encompassed the whole Yukon River Basin, and our part in it was we were doing aerial surveys in the upper basin, and that's basically all the area in Canada. And we surveyed every major tributary and every stream that could have contained Chinook and in the Pelly, of course, and as well, we surveyed the Pelly 2003 and 2004, and as you can see, each of these little red dots are radio tag fish, and it illustrates the spawning distribution of Chinook throughout the watershed. We did our surveys when we timed for maximum, or when the peak spawning was likely to occur. 2 surveys each year. We surveyed the TAA, shown here, and we surveyed it 4 times over those 2 years, and we never picked up any radio tag fish in there. In the last survey of the second year, we started to have a look at it because it was surprising just from the air. It was obviously that there appeared to be some high quality both spawning and rearing habitat in the TAA River, and we never. We certainly expected to see fish in there, and we didn't. So we had a little closer look in the final survey, and we identified a potential barrier down by the mouth of the TAA at the Pelly. And as the shot of it from the air, it wasn't a falls. From what we could see, it looked more like a velocity barrier where the river constricted. And we put that information in the telemetry report, and at that time just kind of filed it away. And then again in 2015, we started thinking about the TAA maybe as a possible restoration candidate, and this was motivated in part by the shift of priorities by the panel, R&E funding priorities geared more towards restoration and enhancement projects. And in our research too, we only came across 2 references of Chinook in the TAA, and they were both quite old, one dating from '62 and another from 1973. And the '73 reference was contained in a consultant's report that did an aerial survey, a helicopter aerial survey of the upper TAA from Teddy Creek, which is approximately 73 kilometers downstream from TAA Lake at the headwaters, and he claimed the consultant claimed he saw one spawning Chinook. If you just see one, I don't know how he knew it was spawning, but that was contained in the report. And this consultant actually was someone who actually had a considerable experience. He was one of the earlier researchers in fisheries research in the Yukon in 1960 and 70, and actually initiated the first weir on the Fishing Branch River. So he had considerable experience, and it seemed like a credible claim, possibly. And also there was some local anecdotal information from the outfitter that worked in the area. He worked, of course, his outfit, McMillan River Outfitters, included the McMillan River, which is a significant Chinook producer. As well, he had camps on the Tay, and talking to him, he said that they had never encountered Chinook in the Tay at the period that he had been there. So we also did a low-level survey in the fall of 2015, just to revisit and have another look at the system. And what we saw kind of reinforced what our opinion were, the opinions that we had gathered back in 2003 and 2004. There seemed to be significant quality rearing habitat in the lower 100 kilometers of the Tay system, and a little more difficult to define spawning habitat as such. But as mentioned in that consultant's report, there does appear to be extensive gravels, extensive possible spawning habitat from Teddy Creek, 73 kilometers up to Tay Lake. In addition, as you saw on the maps, there's some fairly large lakes at the headwaters of the Tay Lake, in the background being the largest, and that's typically a harbinger of possibly suitable Chinook spawning and rearing habitat in a system due to the moderating effects of lakes on water temperatures and flows. There are exceptions, of course, but as a gross generalization, it's usually a good indicator. And on that survey, we had another look at the velocity barrier again, as well as we could get with a fixed-wing aircraft. So that led to us putting in a proposal in 2017, and just to examine the enhancement potential of the system. And we consulted with the SFN at that time. I went up and presented the project to Eugene Alford and Chief McGinty at that time. They certainly they became interested, and they provided a letter of support for the project. And as it turned out, that proposal wasn't accepted. We put in another proposal in 2018 of considerably reduced scope. One of the comments some of the feedback we received on the first proposal was that, well, you don't really know if Chinook are absent in the system, and that's correct. It's not definitive. Absence of radio tags doesn't mean that the Chinook are absent in the system. So one of our main objectives of the 2018 project was to look for the presence or absence of Chinook in the system. And the second objective was to model the estimated Chinook production, and then conduct a preliminary assessment of the identified barrier. So in 2018, June of 2018, we went into the lower Tay, and we just did a typical non-lethal fish species sampling course on the lower Tay. Included beach seining and Zhee trapping. And as well, we collected environmental DNA samples on the lower river at the same time. Part of our program for that year was also conducting an aerial spawning survey in the headwaters from Teddy Creek up to Tay Lake, and that was done in late August 24th. That would correspond when we would assume peak spawning would occur. This is a stage photo of Eugene taking an environmental DNA sample. He should be wearing gloves. That's how I know it's a stage photo. So the results of that all came back negative for Chinook, and I just want to just mention a little bit. I don't want to go off on a tangent on environmental DNA, but it's a relatively new technique, and the protocol we used were those developed by the BC Ministry of Environment, and very strict protocol and sampling guidelines, and that's what we used, and it's one of the more definitive ways of trying to determine the absence of an organism in the system. Our second objective was to look at the production potential of potential production potential of the Tay River, and we used the Parkin model. It's a habitat model that was made for looking at production in systems that are data limited. When you put in the Tay River numbers, parameters, we came up with an MSY of 6,820 fish for a point estimate, and you see the confidence limits around that as well. In my view, I think that's quite high, or not quite high, but biased high somewhat. The Parkin data uses data sets that date back 20 to 50 years, and probably during an era of higher marine production overall, that we're seeing currently. I ran another regression just using 10 northern Chinook stocks with published MSY values, came out with a little bit lower point estimate of 6,300. I think there could be, this is obviously a very important element of the project, what the Chinook production is, and I think we have to do a little bit more work on this using more contemporary data. And we have that, and more specifically for central Yukon Chinook stocks, and we have that for, we do have that contemporary data from Blind Creek and the Big Salmon sonar. And the third objective in 2018, of course, was to do a preliminary assessment of the velocity barrier. We didn't have any real direct measurements other than estimates taken from the air, from the helicopter, and these were run by these were put by shown to a DFO engineer, and he gave us kind of a preliminary assessment of how much material would have to be removed, and the general idea would be to blast out the channel to make it wider and decrease the velocity to a point where Chinook could actually get by there. So it was a very back of the envelope type of assessment. So after the results of the 2018 work came in, we did put another proposal in for 2019. And again, this was a joint proposal by SFN and ourselves. This proposal was accepted, and that's the work that we're currently doing now. We had three main objectives for the 2019-2020 year. First objective was preparation and submission of an environmental assessment and socioeconomic assessment of the project, which is a legal requirement in the Yukon. The second objective was well, the third objective was to conduct a detailed topographic survey of the barrier and develop a design for a fishway that would allow Chinook passage into the system. I'll just talk a little bit about the first objective. The YSAB is an acronym. Most Yukon people here know about the YSAB board. For those in Alaska, it's an acronym for the Yukon Environmental Socioeconomic Assessment Board, and it's an independent body that reviews can review a wide range of projects. Anything that'll trigger a review in this project falls under that category. So what has to be done is that we have to prepare a proposal for the project and submit it to this assessment board. They look at the project overall, maybe request more information, and they do their own research and talk to other agencies, the First Nations possibly, that could be affected, and they come up with a ruling that eventually whether to accept the project, reject it, or accept it with certain conditions. Once that ruling comes down, it goes out to decision bodies, which are typically government agencies or at any level plus First Nations, and then they provide their feedback as well. So at this point, we in early May, June, we did some preliminary consultation with the YSAB board, as well as with some of the decision bodies, and that was to try and anticipate some of the requirements that there may be that will come out of the assessment process. And the idea of that was to try and preempt any long delays related to the requirement for more information. We didn't really get much feedback from that consultation process. Originally, we had planned that we would have to go back into the TAAN and do some fairly extensive field work associated with that, and that never came about this summer. The proposal at this point is more or less complete, and but we'd like to include the fish passage designs that will hopefully be developed in the next month or two, as well as we want to include the traditional knowledge summary on the project from SFN. The second objective of this year's project was to look for alternative sources of funding for the project. We recognize that the Tay River project is quite large in scope, and it probably would fall outside the purview maybe of the traditional funding levels that the R&E fund gives out for these type of projects. With that in mind, and it was identified that the Faro Mine remediation project, which is a large multi-decadal project funded by the federal government of Canada, that the Tay River project may dovetail reasonably well with the Faro Mine remediation plans, and the rationale behind that was that it's known that there was some fish habitat degradation and possible loss of Chinook production in the Pelly River as a result of the Faro Mine operations. And the idea being that the remediation plan would have to provide some sort of offset provisions or compensation for that loss of habitat or degradation of habitat, as well as any real or perceived loss of Chinook production in the Pelly. And if the remediation plan contributed to the Tay River project, it would provide a tangible and quantifiable increase in habitat and Chinook production. So we did meet with the Faro Mine remediation team via teleconference after, a couple of months of emails back and forth, and Eugene Alford and myself, Eugene led it, gave a presentation to the team on the Tay River project, and I think it was fairly well received. We had some follow-up emails on it, and they had scheduled another teleconference at the end of June, but in the meantime, SFN entered into negotiations with the federal government on a general overall compensation agreement regarding the Faro Mine operations, and they wanted to include the Tay River project within that overall agreement. So we stepped back at that point and let SFN carry on with their negotiations, and we really haven't had any part in that since. And the third objective, as I mentioned, was a drone topographic survey of the barrier itself, and that occurred in late October. We just received some technical drawings today and on Friday resulting from that. It took a little while to process that topographic data, and as well we've contracted with a hydraulic engineer to come up with a fishway design for the barrier. We'd also like to solicit other input for fishway designs, possibly from DFO engineers as well. I'll just mention the engineer Chris Kodopoulos is highly regarded. He's got over 30 years in academia and as well working in the private sector, and authored or co-authored over 100 papers on fish passageway and swimming dynamics and energetics, and so he's quite busy, but I'm hoping we'll get a preliminary design from him by the end of this month that we can include in the YESAB proposal, and a final design in March. He's highly credentialed in it, and it's reflected in his charge out rates. So I'll just give a little bit of an overview of the topographic survey and show a few of the results from that. It was conducted on October 19th. I originally wanted to go in early August when water levels or discharges would be representative when Chinook would be entering the system. On advice from the surveyors and the hydraulic engineer, we postponed it to late fall, and that was to allow the water levels to get as low as practically possible and still allow practically possible survey conditions, and so we could survey and map as much of the structure within around the barrier as possible, and as well so we could avoid presence of leafy vegetation, which would have interfered with the drone survey. We set up two base stations for geo-reference points during the survey, one in the canyon above the barrier, and another one halfway down the canyon. We also had to put in surveyed geo-reference ground control points around the barrier itself to provide optimal accuracy for the survey, which is accurate to around plus or minus 5 centimeters. This is just an ortho view of the canyon. The barrier is down in here, and and the launching of the drone was right from there. So this is just an ortho view. There's a drawing on the back table that shows this as well, and this is the main part of the velocity barrier right here. The river constricts down to approximately 1.8 meters, and this is a high water mark, and that's just measured by a debris line that we were able to pick up at that contour level. I'll just show a couple of the section views. Here, this one and this one. This black line is a hypothetical volume of material that would have to be removed to create a fish passageway there 10 meters wide. And that volume of material, of rock, is a maximum that we would be able to take out of there, because we start to run up slope very quickly here as we move out. And this is, from practical point of view, would be the only area that could be blasted out, would be this area. And I want to stress that this is not a fishway design. The hydraulic engineers just got this topographical data yesterday, so he'll be working on it this next month. And we put this in there to illustrate a hypothetical design and the maximum amount of material that could come out of there. And this is just, I mentioned that first sectional view looking downstream, and this would be the material that would have to be blasted out to provide a 10-meter wide passageway. And this is a second section. Of course, because of the upslope of the material, it's going to require more material to come out. And I'll be speaking of that slope a bit more in a minute. This is just a profile view here, showing the elevation differences and the gradients, and this area here is the actual constriction that we're talking about. And the green is the height of the top of the area that would have to be of the material that would have to be removed. And this is just a profile and a section view of that same idea. Shows the gradient over that 28 meters of the area that would be blasted out, and I think that what we can take from this is firstly a large volume of material that has to come out of there. It's orders of magnitude more than what was originally estimated, at over 1,000 cubic meters of rock to achieve that 10-meter wide passage at that location. Like I say, this is entirely hypothetical. I'm assuming that the fishway design, if the fishway design is developed, a practical one will not be this large. The other point I'd like to make that's going to be challenging is the slope immediately above the barrier. This is a picture of the slope here. It's all unconsolidated material. The steepness of the gradient here is about 42%, which is right on the edge of slope stability as well. So that's going to be a factor that maybe wasn't, we certainly didn't consider initially, and that slope will have to be stabilized in some manner before people can work under it and blast it, because there's going to be, if it's conventional blasting, there's going to be significant concussion there over several blasting lifts and it will have to be stabilized in some manner. And I'm going to skip this slide just so we can move on. But if anyone wants to talk about swimming burst speeds and gradients and whether this obstacle can be overcome, certainly talking to the hydraulic engineer and from my own experience working on other fish passage projects, it certainly is technically feasible, but there's going to be definite challenges to it. And like I say, I don't want to go too far into conjecture about what a fishway design will look like until we get back the first designs to look at from the engineer. So in order to meet our objectives this year, our aim is to come up with a practical and achievable fishway design, and after we get that, we can come up with hopefully an approximate costing of the fishway component of the project, and thirdly, obtain regulatory approval for the project. And these are just points. If the project moves beyond that, it will obviously be a project with SFN being the primary interest in it, and probably with other participants, be a multi-year program, and the long-term goal, of course, is to establish a self-sustaining anadromous run of Chinook in the system. And that is it.
Thank you, Mr. Mercer. Questions from panel members on the Tay River project? Go ahead, panel member Rhonda Picca.
So by identified velocity barrier, do you mean a rock?
Pardon me? Sorry?
When you said identified velocity barrier, did you mean a rock?
Essentially, that's it, yeah. What has happened is that the river constricts down to a 1.8 meter gap. It's
Okay.
analogous to holding your thumb over the end of a water hose. And the narrower the gap, the higher the velocity, because the water can't compress, of course.
So when you're done blasting all this rock, where is it going to go?
Well, it would go in that plunge pool at the bottom of the barrier itself. And if we have time, this will take a few minutes, but I do have a video we can play as well. I know that we are short on time. It's about a 5-minute video flyover of the canyon itself.
Thoughts from panel members? I think it was a fairly thorough presentation, and we are a little bit tight on time, but perhaps we could get a copy of the video from you at a later date and
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the video is actually quite informative.
Okay.
How
long is it?
well, I'll run it for 2 minutes and then.
How about that? 2-minute video. Okay.
And then we can stop it. So this is the area that will have to be blasted out here. This is a plunge pool downstream. And of course, that's the velocity barrier here, the gap.
Panel member Andy Bassich would like to ask a question while the video is running.
Sure, we can do that. We'll just let it run.
I know you're a multitasker, so I'm really just curious. I understand the fact of the area that you need to blast out to lower the velocity, but it also looks like there are some barriers and high velocity above that as well. Is that something that will impede salmon? I'm not familiar with what kind of a velocity or what kind of a gradient salmon can go up.
Well, it really is dependent on a number of factors, and that is
that second area up there where the rocks are.
This area
yes.
up here, yes. As you see, if you look at the technical drawings, we actually have identified altering that as well by blasting to make a passageway on that right side. Like I say, this is all hypothetical. I don't want to get into, how are you going to design it, because firstly, it's beyond my expertise. I do have some experience with fish swimming burst speeds and research on that, but hydraulic engineering is not my, I didn't want to get into specifics on that.
I understand that. And then the general concept, I'm not that familiar with fishways or anything. Would the fishway basically be just the area that's blasted out, or would there be construction of some sort of a fish ladder type of a thing? Or is it just going to be the natural flow will be opened up?
Well, ideally what you're aiming at is a natural flow, and I didn't really want to get into that too much, but I will say for sure that we wouldn't be able to put in a conventional fishway structure at that location, just because of the high runoff, high discharge rates, and the high energy that's going to be occur during freshet conditions. Like a step pool or a conventional baffle box cement fishway would not work there. It would require extensive maintenance and repair every year, almost certainly. So what you want to do is try and create a fishway that allow fish to get up there with a minimum of maintenance, long-term maintenance, and that's what we're aiming at. Certainly, there are structures like a steep pass or a Denell fishway you could make fabricate out of aluminum, put in there, and that would allow Chinook passage. It's not that onerous. We're only talking about a few meters of elevation to get over here, but that would have to be bolted in as well and removed every year, else you'd have problems with that.
Any further questions from panel members? Yeah, go ahead, panel member James McDonald.
Not so much a question, I guess. I think I heard you say that you were in speaking with the outfitter, the McMillan outfitters, in relation to observations, environmental, otherwise, for the presence of Chinook. And I guess what I didn't hear is a conversation with Selkirk First Nation elders who may have information of that nature. So I guess I would just kind of encourage you as much as I can to be in contact with Eugene and his team and the Elders Council and the Selkirk First Nation in general, who have a vested interest in these type of projects.
Oh, absolutely, and actually, I didn't mention that, but during the consultation process in 2017 with Eugene and Chief McGinty, Eugene came back to me a couple of months later and did mention, that he alluded to traditional knowledge that associated with fishing on the Tay River, and I deliberately didn't say that because we will be. We actually have retained Darlene McGinty at Pelly Crossing to interview some of the elders, and as you well know, they have a strict policy and dissemination of traditional knowledge, and they have a protocol on that. That's why I didn't actually want to speak to it at this case, but we're certainly aware of it, and I don't want to presume that what it's going to be. But, I can say from Darlene, she kind of gave me the indication that there is traditional knowledge that indicated that there was fishing at that spot.
I should maybe also add that Brian was invited to the Northern Shoshone annual gathering last May, where you provided a presentation on this project to the 3 Northern Shoshone nations. So
That's correct, and as well, I provided two presentations prior to that, one to the council and one to the Elders Council at Pelly Crossing.
any further questions from panel members? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Mercer, for your presentation. We do appreciate you accommodating our request on this project, so thank you. So at this point, I believe I'm calling Elizabeth McDonald. We're going into the communications, I guess it's committee updates or communications presentations, and we will have 2 presentations, one on the Yukon River Panel's education exchange, and the second on the Yukon River Panel's communications initiative. So hopefully I've got that right.
You can load up Elizabeth's. That's okay. Exchange. Okay, thank you. I know we're getting late in the day, so we're going to keep this really tight. Just wanted to kind of bring, we've heard a lot about the science side of things, and we have another portfolio within the panel that we wanted to kind of share with you. Andy and I have been working in a subcommittee within the panel on communications. And as you know, we have a communications portfolio within the Restoration and Enhancement Fund. And so one of the panel projects is the educational exchange, Yukon River Panel Educational Exchange. And Elizabeth will be giving a very short, abridged version of that presentation. And then we are also working on a campaign which we hope will have broad participation, and we're open to working with any others on that campaign. And Natasha will be providing a very quick overview of that presentation. So Andy, I don't know if you want to talk about the composition or who's on it, or anything you want to add?
Or I mean the committee? Yeah, so our committee has basically been just formed by volunteers, people interested in communications. Jesse in the past, and we also have, in the past we've had Don and Harvey, and then on the Alaska side, John Lamont and myself. And so certainly encourage anybody who's interested in getting involved in the communications projects to contact us and work with us. We're really excited about this new initiative. We think we're going to be developing some really unique platforms that have multi-purpose and very easy to take and utilize in many different areas. So we may be hitting some of you up for interviews now during this meeting. Of course we have been, and into the future. And of course we're always in search of media, so any types of photos, interviews. And I also want to give a special thank you to Caroline Brown from the Department of Subsistence with Alaska Department of Fish and Game. She's dedicated a lot of her time and some of her staff time in kind to help search and kind of mine some of those old photos, old interviews. So be aware, we may be in contact, or we may be putting kind of a call out at various times as we work on different projects to bring to you. And this, I just want to remind you also, this is a Yukon panel project. This isn't something, an external proponent. This is our project, so we need your input, and we're going to move ahead, and Dennis and I are really excited with moving on with this initiative. And with that, I'd like to introduce Natasha. She's with ESSA, who we have contracted to do a lot of the outreach and help us to get this technical messaging, all of this technical charts and graphs and terminology. She's an expert at bringing it down to the grassroots level and making it understandable for lack of better terms, a layman. So take it away.
Thanks, Andy. So I think these got flipped, so I'll go first, and then we'll have Elizabeth on the educational exchange. And if I could just get the slides up. Yeah, thank you. So as Andy said, part of the impetus behind this project, this panel project, is that we've heard over the last few days that the panel is doing its own work and also funding R&E project work that is really important, and that involves a lot of amazing people in this room. But at this moment, a lot of that is just buried in reports on the website, and it's really hard for people to share that work that's being done. And most importantly, what we really want to do is remind people that there are real people and places behind a lot of the projects that the people in this room work on and that the panel supports. And so what we're trying to do is a bit of a more visual approach to a communications campaign that is more focused on photos and videos and less on graphs and the numbers to help get some of those important messages across. And so what we're mainly planning to do is 5 short videos for 2 to 5 minutes each, relying really heavily on a lot of the film and footage that has already been shot through different projects in the region, and recycling a lot of that maybe hasn't really been used before, and keeping things really high level in a way that's easy to watch and share and understand with all of the people in your communities that can't travel to these meetings and can't be in this room for these discussions. And these will be posted to the panel's website and their YouTube channel. And these are some of the main themes we're hoping to focus on. So a bit about the panel, the treaty and the panel, and what its responsibilities are, a bit about the kinds of science that support the panel's work without going too much into the nitty-gritty details, and then a video on one of the flagship, as Angus said the other day, R&E projects, the Yukon River Educational Exchange, and helping translate some of the stories and things that people have learned and experienced on those. And then another video that would be a highlight reel of the community restoration and enhancement projects, that a lot of which have been funded and done in this area. And then finally, a project on, or a video on some of the key overarching concepts in salmon conservation. And by this, I mean what kinds of things people all along the river and communities are already doing to uphold their relationships with salmon in the way they have done for many hundreds of years. And so for this last one especially, we have been and will be filming some more interviews with people who have attended this meeting, and also people who attended the First People Summit to get their perspectives on what people are already doing to contribute to supporting salmon. And so I just want to end by showing a very short video, less than 2 minutes, and if I could get the sound up for this in the back. An example of what we've got so far. This one is on the educational exchange, using some really nice footage that was shot of the exchange on the last one. And I just want to remind everyone that this is a rough product, and it was made before we were able to shoot any interviews. So we will be definitely adding people's personal narratives in here, folks that went on the exchange. So I'm just going to play it real quick. Hopefully the sound works. Each year, the Yukon River Panel's Restoration and Enhancement Fund supports science and stewardship projects and programs aimed at improving restoration, conservation, and enhancement of Canadian origin salmon stocks. One of the longest-running stewardship programs supported by this fund is the Yukon River Educational Exchange Program. Yukon River salmon are a shared resource, and rebuilding their populations requires cooperation across the entire Yukon River drainage. Of course, it's much easier to work together when we know and understand each other, so it's important that fishing families and other residents of the river understand similarities and differences in the food, cultural, and economic significance of salmon for their neighbors. The Educational Exchange Program was created as a way to build relationships and to expand knowledge on both sides of the border about the importance of conserving and restoring Yukon salmon. In each year of the program, 5 to 6 participants from a range of backgrounds are chosen to participate in a guided week-long exchange between Alaska and the Yukon Territory, with participants alternating travel between countries from year to year. During each exchange, participants visit local communities on the other side of the border to meet fishers and learn about the importance of the resource for people and their culture, to meet fish processors to learn about how fish contribute to the local economy, and to meet scientists and managers to learn how the salmon are monitored to inform management. These experiences have helped to build understanding and relationships that cross national boundaries, just like salmon do. And they continue to remind us that no matter where you live on the Yukon River, salmon is a way of life. Okay, and In addition to these videos, I just want to quickly say that there's also budget to produce some additional supporting materials, which could include things like working on some bilateral messages everyone can agree on, brochures or posters that maybe talk about some of the same things that the videos might. It could be a map of how all of the organizations that contribute to salmon management are connected to each other, a bit about what the panel's done in the past, and maybe a special part of the YRP website to house all these things. So really just to produce some products that are not dense reports that you can share in your communities to help spread these messages and talk about what the panel's been doing. So I think that's all I had, and maybe I'll hand it off to Elizabeth now, and I guess we'll take questions together at the end. Yeah, okay.
Go ahead, panel member Dennis Mervin.
While Elizabeth is loading that up. So just one of the tenets of our group is parity, so it's really important that we have that parity on both sides. And so we tend to work with the Salmon Subcommittee on the Canadian side and the Yukon River Drainage Fisheries Association on the Alaskan side, and then our membership also reflects that. And on the Canadian side, I wanted to just acknowledge Harvey Jessup, who's worked with us, Elizabeth, of course, and Don Taves for his work as well, working with us. And then on the American side, we've got Andy, of course, and John Lamont. And am I forgetting anybody right now? But we're open for business, accepting more membership to our informal club. So thank you.
Sounds good. So this is going to be a little shorter, just to keep us on time, hopefully. So that exchange, this is from April this spring, I guess. And Alaskans came here to Canada. And usually I'd be up here presenting with YRDFA as the other co-host. But Wayne couldn't come here. He had a family emergency, so I'm going to do it on behalf of both of us. And again, as Dennis and everyone pointed out, this is a panel project. YRDFA and Salmon Subcommittee, we just deliver and support the panel. So we had a couple participants come this last season down from the lower river, a resident as well of St. Mary's who no longer lives on the river, just in the summer, and then Wayne from Homer. And they all flew up to Fairbanks, and for the first time they did the drive and rather enjoyed it. It saved a good chunk of money as well, but it gave them the opportunity to kind of prepare themselves as the scenery changed on the way up. Here are 3 lovely participants, and this fellow here, you have seen his smiling face the last few days because he didn't get enough the last trip and he had to come back for a little bit more. So that's Robert. And then we also have Serena and Kenneth, again from the lower river as well. And then for hosts, we got Wayne, myself, and then the last fellow is Tip, because I was busy at the panel, so he was gracious and came and lent us a hand. He's from Johnson's Crossing, so just a little bit upstream of here on the Teslin. So they got to participate in the panel process for the first time ever, and really enjoyed it and found they learned a lot. It gave them the want to come back and participate more as they learned more about the organizations and all the people that come together for this. And they got to partake in a couple informal meetings because, of course, when the panel's here, people come here. So there's an opportunity to see people that you wouldn't normally find here in Whitehorse. And they got to hear about community-based salmon management from Selkirk First Nation, Eugene Elford, as well as a couple other tours around town. Probably one of the highlights of the trip was really going out to Teslin, Tlingit traditional territory. We got to go out there and see the restoration project. And a big group came, not just the participants, but some of the Canadian members. PSC came out, quite a few First Nations, and we went to Deadman Creek. Ben Shaunaville and James McGrath from Teslin Tlingit Council were out there and kind of provided the tour to us. And the highlight here at Deadman was seeing the Alvin. So Robert and Kenneth had never seen baby salmon before, so it was a bit of a treat for them to see them, and it really left an impression with them. Then we also went into Teslin and met with the Teslin Elders Council. And then after lunch and a few words of wisdom from the elders, we went out to Morley. And here we got to see baby salmon again. But here they're a little bit further developed because they're in warmer water. So the participants got to see not just Alvin, but baby fry as well. And way over here, you can see Robert letting go baby fry. So the joke is he works at the lower river, and he catches the adults for ADF and G when they come back, and he takes scale samples, DNA, and lets them go. And these little babies that he's letting go, we joke that in 5 years he'd be catching them at the mouth of the river. They also got to do a visit out to Gwich'in fish camp at Helen's Fish Camp at Lake Labarge, and Elder Shirley Adamson gave them a bit of a traditional cultural side tour while they were there, and then they also got to go out to the creek, and Coralie Jones gave them an update on how the restoration project at Fox Creek went, both the habitat and the stock restoration. They also got to meet with Kwalin Dunn representatives. So Nick, you guys hopefully at the social last night got a 20-year update on Mitchie Creek, and he provided that to the participants, as well as Brandy Mays provided some First Nation perspectives around self-government, salmon management, and of course sharing salmon with communities along the river. They also, next they went over to see Lawrence Vagno at the hatchery and got to see more baby salmon at a slightly older stage. So they really got to see a lot of a habitat or a baby salmon stage that you just don't see when you're catching adults all the time. So that was pretty nice. And Lawrence also took them over to the fish ladder, and so there was no water in the fish ladder, but at least they got to see it and see what happens there, and there's great visuals there. Everybody really enjoyed Lawrence, and they said that if we needed to send a salmon ambassador, he'd be a great guy. Just let him go up the whole length of the river and talk to everybody, and all our salmon problems would be solved, is what the participants said. Then in that afternoon, we also got to meet with Yukon Fish and Game for a non-First Nation perspective of salmon management, as well as things they're doing to keep people, Yukoners, engaged while there are no harvest opportunities. And part of that workshop in the afternoon, too, we got the participants to give us feedback, really good information on how to reach out to communities along the river, some of the messages that were needed, as well as they gave us suggestions for upcoming educational exchange as well. And here they are. And this is Tip. He managed to stay out of all the photos, so we had to put a picture of him in at the end to thank him for his hard work.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So questions from panel members? Go ahead, Harvey Jessup.
Well, just looking forward, of course, could you give us maybe a bit of the expectations for 2020, when, where, just a bit of a plug for participants? For sure. So we get our direction from the subcommittee, but currently what we've kind of compiled is that we're looking at targeting youth, which would be like 18-year-old to up to maybe 35, to try and get younger people that are perhaps easier and better able to share a message outside themselves, mainly through social media. So I forget our theme. I think John Lamont came up with it. It was something like sharing knowledge in today's world is the theme. And so our hope is that each participant who came would be assigned a day, and on that day they are responsible for doing an outreach piece or a communications piece. They may not be able to share it that day. We might have to wait till we get back to a place with internet or some kind of connection. There are also discussion of maybe doing a sister city thing. So this year, Canadians would go to, say, a specific city in the Alaskan side, and the next year that city would pick the participants, and they'd go visit the Yukon community. So we're still developing it and building it, and it'll be done through the communication subcommittee. So if you have ideas, please let someone on that committee know so that we can incorporate them. But that's generally the rough idea. So we'd be another 5 to 6 people potentially going to Alaska this June, I'm assuming.
Panel member Rhonda Picca, go ahead.
I've always particularly liked this project just because of the cultural exchange parts, but with the idea of a meeting in Galena, perhaps it would be a good idea to hold off on this project for the next year and just go to Galena instead. Another shameless plug. Galena.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from panel members? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Natasha, Dennis, and Andy for all of your work, and certainly as a panel we'll be discussing both of these initiatives further as we plan for 2020. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our agenda here. We have a couple items related to orders of business that I'll touch on. We don't have any committee meeting updates, although we will schedule to have John Field from the Pacific Salmon Commission participate in a future discussion with the panel on the file management strategy. So. Correspondence, item number 4 for this afternoon, just for the panel's record and reference, the co-chairs of the Yukon River panel issued 3 letters of correspondence over the last, well, I guess about 8 months or so. One was a letter of support for the Bering Sea juvenile salmon trawl surveys for 2020, so ensuring that funding continues for that program. The second was issuance of the request for the Yukon Restoration and Enhancement funding for 2020 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then finally, a letter of correspondence outlining instructions for the Pacific Salmon Commission with respect to documenting meeting minutes. As far as other business goes, I don't believe there's any further business or additions to the agenda. I'll look to Mr. Co-Chair on this item.
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Co-Chair, so I concur.
Thank you. And so then we'll move to our second last item of the day, which is just looking to schedule the 2020 pre-season Yukon River panel meeting. And I know there's been much discussion around the specific location and venue. What we do know is that it'll be hosted by the United States, somewhere in Alaska. And specifically, we can flag the period of April 3rd to the 8th of 2020. So just simply for scheduling purposes, as a placeholder in your respective calendars, April 3rd to the 8th, 2020. And further information will be provided on specific venue and location over the coming weeks, I imagine. Ultimately, it'll be that information and details with respect to meeting location will be posted on the Yukon River Panel's website and available for everyone well in advance of the meeting. So we're pretty much right back on time now, approaching 4 o'clock. We have a number of requests for public testimony, so we'll move into that stage of our agenda. So for representatives who have signed up for public testimony, if you could join us at the front of the room. And I've done my best to arrange these in the order that I believe they're to be presented in. So if I make a misstep, I apologize. So the first presenter of public testimony will be Ms. Hannah Turner from the TESLINTLINGIT Council. Is Ms. Turner in the room? Oh, great.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking the panel for allowing me to speak here today. My name is Hannah Turner. I am a Teslin-Tlingit Council citizen, and I've been working as the Natural Resources Manager for the Teslin-Tlingit Council for the past 2 years. I'm here today to deliver a message on behalf of my government. As most of you are aware, Teslin-Tlingit Council recently renewed our salmon management plan. This community-based management plan includes an adaptive management model that is largely based on run health, in addition to border escapement. And the consideration of both of these factors together demonstrates that TTC knows that the quality of the run is based on much more than just numbers, and that the run is being impacted heavily by many elements that are outside of our control, including climate change. With that being said, Teslin-Tlingit Council remains very concerned about the management approaches that are taken in Alaska. Chinook continue to be utilized for commercial purposes, while Teslin-Tlingit and others forgo harvesting rights to protect dwindling stocks. In-season management approaches are unpredictable, and they need to be much more conservative due to the high levels of uncertainty in both run size and run health. Teslin-Tlingit Council feels strongly that there is a growing need to take a critical look at the Yukon River Salmon Agreement. The current agreement doesn't reflect rapidly changing environmental conditions. The current agreement doesn't enforce harvest share obligations, and it doesn't provide for any increase in restoration and enhancement funding into the future. Lastly, Teslin-Tlingit Council would like to echo the words of some of the testimonials that happened today before mine. We need to address the lack of First Nation representation on the Joint Technical Committee. We need to see a meaningful process for providing traditional knowledge. And we need to incorporate traditional knowledge into the Yukon River panel discussion. Chinook salmon are a critical food source for Teslin-Tlingit, as they are for First Nations all along the Yukon River. And for nearly 20 years, Teslin-Tlingit people have voluntarily reduced their harvest of Chinook salmon in an effort to conserve. I am 24 years old. I have never known what it is to gather at a fish camp with my family. And I have never known what it is to harvest a Chinook salmon. During these past 20 years, cholesterol levels in Teslin were found to be the highest in the Yukon. Our people have started to develop allergies to salmon, and our sick people do not have access to the salmon that their bodies desperately need to recover. Yukon River Chinook cannot simply be replaced with other species or with other salmon that has been purchased from elsewhere and brought into our community. The Yukon River Chinook salmon are our life, and we need them to live. Gwitchin, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Any questions from panel members or comments? No? We'll express our thanks for your participation today, and obviously thanks for the continued guidance and words of wisdom from Teslin-Tlingit Council. It is appreciated.
Thank you.
So next, I would like to call Ms. Dorothy Shockley from alternate YRP representative, I believe. Is that correct?
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. I am Upper Gwich'in Athabascan of the Caribou clan, and my late parents and grandparents come from the communities of Tanana, Cross Jacket, Rampart, and Stevens Village. Thank you to the First Peoples of this nation for allowing us to be on your beautiful land and hosting us. Thank you very much. In order to understand where we are today, we have to look at our past. And to understand our past in order to move forward. As we look at our past, the past 100 years of salmon fisheries, I believe they were very plentiful back then. I would like to see a salmon circle that reflects those 100 years and the significant events that happened that affected those salmon numbers and runs. Just a few that I believe has really affected those runs are the government management, commercial, fishing, and population. And there are many others, I'm sure, as we talk to our elders and look at what's happened in the past 100 years. So once we understand that, it would give us a better understanding of where we are today. And to really look at where we are today, in regards to this panel, we can look at the past 20 years. You know, what significant things has this panel done in the past 20 years? How effective has it been? Is it effective? Has the goal been reached in regards to feeding everyone on the Yukon and the subsidiaries? So it's really important. And the other things, of course, that are happening today in regards to our climate and just this, I think, significant things that people are doing in regards to managing. And so we look at the present and we understand our past, look at the present, where we are today, and it will help us look into the future and what things that we need to do better. Every year, I think no matter who you are, where you are, you evaluate the past year. You know, how did things go? What do I need to change? And so it's significant that we do that as we look to the future. You know, what kind of things do we need to change? How are we doing? You know? And I've heard, and of course, talking to the first peoples of this nation, we can't continue doing what we've been doing, because if you look at the numbers, it's not working. If you look at the people, it's not working. And so we can't just use data. I mean, we've been doing that for how many years now? And as we can see, it hasn't been effective. So looking at the people, the actual users, and people who depend, and I mean, their life depends on these salmon. So they have this amazing personal relationship. And they are really the experts. And so in order for us to move forward and be effective, I believe we need that balance. We need the numbers. It's always good to have those numbers. But we also need to have the people, the users, equally, their knowledge, their understanding, and their input in it as well. And most of all, we need to respect these amazing creatures. I don't know if I should call them creatures, but amazing salmon fish, because they are amazing and incredible. The way that they make their way down the Yukon into the ocean and then come back. I mean, you can't dispute that they're amazing fish. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shockley, and thank you very much for traveling a long way to join us this week. We appreciate your presence. Mr. Co-Chair.
Yes, I'd also like to echo those comments. Dorothy, thank you very much for taking the time out of, I know you all have very busy schedules, and again, maybe not to embarrass her too much, but in addition to being a lifelong fisher on the Yukon, she also is heavily involved in various organizations and engaged with fisheries issues throughout the Yukon, including YRP, the Untitled Fish Commission, helping out with our comprehensive salmon plan. So thank you for being here. I hope to see you again at future meetings.
Okay, next we will move to Miss Jessica Black. Do we have Jessica Black in the room? Welcome.
Shalaknai. I would like to first recognize and pay my respect to Chief Rhonda Pitka of Beaver, Vice President Charlene Stern of Tanana Chiefs Conference, and respected chiefs and tribal leaders of this land. I would also like to recognize the Indigenous people, the Kwanlin Dun and TAAN KWACH'AN, and thank you for allowing me to speak and be on your land. I humbly come before you as a relative on the other side of the border. I would also like to thank the Yukon River panel for listening to what I have to say today. Shojrit Jessica Oji Gwachaje Gwatsan Ithli Ga Tanan Gwichi Shahan Marlene Shiti Bill Shitsutsa Shitsi Sarah Isaac John Gwichaje Gwatsan Hisha. My name is Jessica Black. I'm from Fort Yukon. I live in Fairbanks. I am the daughter of Marlene DeRochers and Bill Black and the granddaughter of the late Sarah and Isaac John of Gwich'aa. As a Gwitchin person from the time I was little, I always knew we had relatives on the other side of the border. I remember all our celebrations, but also our times of challenges. People from Old Crow and other parts of Canada would come to visit, and we would go to visit them. One of the first pictures I have in my baby photo album is of my mom, my dad, and I going to Old Crow to visit. Our lives as Indigenous people are intertwined, historically, physically, culturally, and spiritually, only separated by an artificial border formed by governments that don't understand this relationship that spans thousands of years, but we do. We know our health depends on your health and vice versa, and we all depend on salmon. We all depend on caribou. We are one. In my current capacity as faculty at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, in addition to teaching, I spend my days researching salmon and people, specifically the sociocultural aspects of salmon and people relationships in Alaska Native communities. I co-lead several large research projects, and what I found to date would really not be a surprise to most of the Indigenous people in this room. And that is that our intimate relationship with salmon has spanned 12,000 plus years. This relationship is one that is centered on Indigenous values, including respect, responsibility, and reciprocity, but most important, spirituality. As Indigenous people, we have a spiritual relationship with our Creator and responsibility to care for our salmon and all the lives on which we are intimately in relationship with. This responsibility, and hence the balance, has been disrupted because not only are our salmon in peril, we've seen that through how many presentations in the last couple of days, but this balance is in peril because the first stewards of this land, us, have largely been left out of conversations regarding salmon science and management. So we have not kept our promise to the Creator. Yes, we are consulted periodically, but do not have equitable seats at various governance tables. This is unfortunate because we have much to offer and contribute to the conversation, and we spend so much time on the land and in our environment, which gives us a true pulse of what is happening. Our Indigenous knowledge spans thousands of years, passed down from our parents, our grandparents, other elders, and through our stories and dreams. This knowledge is far-reaching, and it's a collective knowledge. It cannot be separated. Indigenous peoples are often referred to as canaries in the coal mine, warning others of imminent danger, and we have witnessed this to be true. whether that be in terms of climate warnings from Indigenous people the world over for decades, or a dwindling salmon population, as we have been testifying for also decades. Because we are so closely tied to the land physically and spiritually, we are the first to witness and receive these warnings and impacts. As sovereign tribal people, we take these warnings seriously, and we are ready to not only offer our Indigenous knowledge to enhance stewardship, but also to be at the helm of that stewardship. Doing so won't negatively impact salmon or anything else, but rather serve to enhance everything. We think collectively, and we take our cultural values, such as responsibility and reciprocity, seriously, and will do everything in our power to ensure the holistic system thrives. Operating from the standpoint of numbers and estimates is not enough, and people have been saying for 20 plus years that we need more. Let's take the best of our Indigenous knowledge and Western science and come together in a good way. This will require shifts, though. It will require shifts on our current governance bodies, as was said previously, with more Indigenous representation. One example would be to work with and support the work of the newly formed Yukon River First Nations group. This will also require an investment in research that documents Indigenous knowledge, which is living knowledge, constantly adapting and growing. It is not static. So it will take continued investment in documenting this knowledge led by Indigenous researchers who know the land and know their communities. Lastly, it will require us all to decolonize the way we think and meaningfully include all Indigenous people from various parts of the river engaging in these conversations. This will require hard work in getting to the communities along the river, listening and learning. This panel has been invited by Chief Charlie Green of Loudon to host your next meeting in his community. This is an incredible invitation, and I hope one that is heeded. Anything less than equitable Indigenous involvement and active participation in salmon stewardship will result in the status quo, and I believe that is an outcome none of us are willing to accept. Masicho.
Thank you very much, Ms. Black. Any questions or comments from panel members? Rhonda Pitka, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Black, for your testimony. I really appreciate all of the points that you made, and I do agree that we have a responsibility to the people of the river. So again, let's go to Kalina.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll move to Mr. Andy Bassich. Have it.
Thank you. Thank you for an opportunity to actually speak here instead of working as a panel member. I'm taking off my hat as a Yukon River panel member, and I'm speaking to you now from my heart as a subsistence fisherman in the upper Yukon River. Show me which one. Okay, that advances. And then that's the pointer. Thank you. So what I want to talk a little bit about is some of the observations I've made over the last 25 or 30 years living along the Yukon River. And many of you know me and know my mantra of quality of escapement. And during this meeting, we've had a lot of people come up and give testimony and talk about quality of escapement and changing conditions and how the fish have changed. And I've always believed that a picture can speak more than 1,000 words. This is a picture that I took back in 2005, very early on, of what we've got in the Yukon River right now, what we're seeing happening. On the left hand, in my right hand, right here, that's the skein, one skein, there are two of them in a salmon, obviously, of about a 12-pound fish. and I'll show you a little bit of data in just a minute or two as to what that constitutes. On this side is approximately about a 25-pound fish. You can see there's quite a bit of a difference here between the two. This is what we used to have on the Yukon River. When I first fished, I want to tell you a very quick story. The very first fish I ever pulled out of the Yukon River, I had moved to Eagle. I had no knowledge of how to live off the land or anything. I was just a young man coming into the country, full of vigor and just wanting to live the lifestyle. I had a 12-foot little boat with a little 5-horsepower motor on it, and I borrowed a net from a person in Eagle, and I asked them, how do you do this? They gave me a quick explanation. I went out, set the net, and the very first fish that I pulled in the next day, I thought I had snagged the bottom of the Yukon, and he had warned me that the spot has a lot of snags in it. It was in a little back slough. And I reached over and I pulled and I pulled, and I was kind of swearing to myself because I didn't know what I was doing and I couldn't get the net up, and then it slowly began to come up. And as it came up, out of the water came the mouth of a salmon that was this big. This salmon was so big that I couldn't hardly pull it into the boat. It almost capsized the boat when I pulled it in the boat. And I have to honestly admit, I shrieked like a girl when that mouth came out. It scared me. I thought I didn't know what I had. And I took that salmon to the post office and I weighed it, and it was 65 pounds. That's an official scale. So I know I've lived at a time when this is what we saw on the Yukon River. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, people only take pictures of big fish. That's true. Everybody likes to take pictures of big fish, right? That's a catch. That's not taking a picture of just a big fish. That's a catch. So there's no high grading there. And what I want you to notice about this picture is the size of the fish, the girth of the fish. Look at how big and fat they are. Back then, many people used 10-inch mesh net, very large mesh net to catch these. And these fish were so powerful that they would just punch holes through nets. You'll hear lots of stories about that. This is what we have now. This is a typical fish that I catch. Now, granted, I'm fishing a 6-inch mesh net up in the area. I'm trying to conserve on the large fish. But what I'm trying to point out right here is this. They're like a torpedo. They've changed phenotypically. Their bodies have changed now over time with the type of escapements that we've released back up. The type of fish that we've grown now have changed from that big, fat, healthy-looking fish to a long, narrow fish. It's very, very different than what you saw in those other pictures. I heard one panel member tell me as we were talking this summer, or I'm sorry, at the beginning of this meeting, that they feel like the run is sick. It's not what it used to be. And he's not referring to disease, but it's sick because it's not what it used to be. It's not the big, powerful, healthy, proud fish. You look at the fish now that they come up, and yeah, they're edible. And yes, they're still beautiful, but they're not what they were. Oops. So what I want to point out here, because I want you to understand what this change in size of fish is doing on the Yukon River and to our ability to rebuild the runs. And what I want to point out is, look at this number. This is the fecundity. So this is the weight of a fish, 55 pounds. This is the egg content of that fish, 7,255. This is the length of that fish right in here, about 1,100 millimeters. I blew that up. Now look at this, 33. You think that's a big fish. And it is. That's still a very nice fish. But it only carried 9,000. And it was somewhere right around 900 millimeters. Now, if you remember during a lot of your presentations, you saw that there was an average going past Eagle of 773 millimeters. Look at that, somewhere right around there. They're calling that a 19-pound fish, and it's only carrying 6,000 eggs. A fish that's 30 pounds was carrying approximately 9,000 eggs, and a 55-pound fish was carrying 17,000. So the point I'm trying to make is the size of one fish that was a normal catch that we had 30 years ago is now equal to 2 to 2.5 fish. That's an important thing we have to think about. So I'm going to leave that picture up. I'm not trying to point any fingers. I'm just trying to let people who have never witnessed, who have never lived through what we have lived through, what we have seen, the changes that have taken place, and the impacts of those changes are doing. And I want to end on a really positive note. I've been so impressed by the testimony given at this meeting. We've never had testimony like this before. And what I got out of it is the feeling that we have a chance right now to create a new paradigm on the Yukon River. And it starts with the individual. It starts with each person taking ownership of their contributions to conservation and to the rebuilding. Each person. And then we'll get 2 people, and it'll be stronger. And then we'll get 3 people, and it'll be stronger yet. And as you build that group of people that are taking ownership and want to grow and want to solve this problem, you need to give them something to work towards. They need a goal. They need something that they all want, that they can believe in, that when they sacrifice or when they give up some of that harvest, some people call it hardship, they need to feel good about that. And what I'm going to suggest is that we make the goal, the objective of the future of the people on the Yukon River, the goal is to return salmon like this, the 7-year-old and 8-year-old. These used to be 8-year-olds. There's some debate about that, but the 7-year-olds, let's make our goal. Let's get that age class back in the Yukon River. When I came on the panel, the age class of 7-year-olds was about 10% of the run. So there's 10% of the run were still very large fish like this. Now it's down to barely 1%. So I've always felt that the key, the goal, is to return these big fish back to Teslin. If we can get big fish like this back to Teslin, I think we will be rebuilding the fish on the Yukon River. So let's take this message out, go back to your communities, let's put our heads together, let's create a common goal, let's work together to try and bring this back, because this is what I want to see the future of the Yukon River. The young people growing up now, we owe it to them to bring back this. And the last thing I want to do is I'd like to just do a real brief survey here. Everybody who has ever caught a large 30, 40-pound salmon, can you stand up? Thank you. Everybody look around. 1, 2. It looks like there's at least 30 people here. Okay? That's really important. Now, let me ask this question. Of all those people who have caught a fish like this in their lifetime, how many have caught a fish like this in the last 3-4 years? Can you stand up? Does anybody? Okay, so we have about 6 people. And the point I'm trying to make is that they're still there. We can still do it, but we've got to focus on doing it. And so we have to focus on what can we do to protect these salmon in our management and in our actions. The managers aren't going to be able to do this for us. The people on the river are going to have to take onus on that, and that means fish in a way that you can avoid this type of fish as much as we possibly can. Thank you, and I hope just bringing pictures to those that have never seen this helps them to understand what it is we're talking about, because we have a lot of words that go between us. We share lots of experiences, but oftentimes we can't envision what it is. So I hope this helps you to envision what we had and what we should work for. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Darius?
Good? Yeah. I noticed a couple of pictures there. I used to grow up and live in Teslin, and all due respect to my Tlingit brothers and sisters, I used to sit with Roger Smirch and Virginia at her fish camp down from the bridge, and she used to sing to the smoke. She had a Tlingit song to sing to the smoke so that it would go equally amongst the salmon that were hanging. And we used to wait for Uncle Jim to drift with us at night. And then as soon as she said stop fishing, it was stopped. Those are the memories that we have. And I remember those fish used to just drip with grease. And they were those big fish. I was 12 years old, and she taught me how to cut those king salmon in the Tlingit way. And thank you for your presentation. It just brought back a very good memory there about traditional knowledge and about how we care for the salmon.
It's you know, I can remember when I first met Carl at the panel meetings. He came to us early on, and he told us the fish are getting smaller. And then the people from Pele started saying the fish are getting smaller. And then the people from Dawson said the fish are getting smaller. And then me, 100 miles downriver from Dawson, I started seeing the fish are getting smaller. And I brought that, and I started trying to tell other people. And then the people at Fort Yukon said the fish are getting smaller. And then it went down to the Tanana, and the fish are getting smaller. And that's about the time we started paying attention. But we had lost so much by then. But I'm confident. I'm positive, and I'm confident that we can bring that back. We have the genetics there to do it. Let's just do it. We just have to be responsible fishermen.
Carl Sidney, panel member, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you, Andy, for that presentation. I totally agree with what you're saying. We are a little bit late, but better late than never, I guess. I just want to stress, in order to get those 7- and 8-year-olds back, we have to pay attention to what we let, that number that we have right now in the escapement goal, 45,000, is definitely not enough. When we get a run like we did last year, I mean this past season, we have to pay attention and let more of that fish back to spawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Looking around the room. Okay, so next I would like to introduce Ms. Cheryl Charlie from the Vuntut Gwitchin government. Counselor, correct? So thank you for joining us, and welcome.
Dringon Winzi, Shojit Cheryl Charlie Vaji, Old Croak Yukon Gwitchin. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Charlie, and I'm from Old Crow, Yukon. I just want to show respect and acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the TAAN, Gwich'in, and Kwalindun First Nation. As my fellow Vuntut member Stanley Najutli mentioned this morning of the Dogo people, I am of the Dogo people. My grandfather is the late Charlie Peter Charlie, Sr., who was born and raised in Johnson Creek Village. And Johnson Creek Village is of the Dogo Nation. The Vuntut people are Caribou people, but I just wanted to say that we are also Salmon people. In the summer months when the caribou are calving on the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, we rely, celebrate, and welcome the salmon through the river that flows through our territory in the community of Old Crow, the Porcupine River. The salmon sustains us. The Vuntut people are doing our part to conserve and manage the salmon population with our Porcupine River Salmon Management Plan, which was finalized this past summer. I will quote directly from the plan our vision and values. Our vision is one that reflects our traditional values, sustainability principles, and we are committed to building a strong and self-determined First Nation, and we will strive to create and maintain a healthy, vibrant community that provides a safe, supportive environment in which to live, work, and raise our families. Our values are, in order to preserve, protect, and maintain our Vuntut way of life, traditional occupation, and use of our waters, lands, and wildlife, and to strive for economic, community, spiritual, and personal well-being. We value the empowerment of our people. We value all that is living. We value our children and youth, who are the leaders of tomorrow, and we instill in them an awareness of our Vuntut identity and values, and also to promote their education and enhance their future. We value our traditional language, our culture, spirituality, and the teachings of our elders. We also value accountable and transparent governance. My fellow council member, Brandy Teja, and her daughter visited Fishing Branch area this summer, also known as Ninjik, and observed only 5 bears within the area within 1 week. The normal bear sighting is around 30. This tells us that the low numbers of fall chum are affecting the bear population of the Fishing Branch area, and that these two species are directly correlated. We encourage more research on bear population within North Yukon. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to address the panel today. Masi.
Thank you, Councillor Charlie. Any questions from panel members? I would like to extend our appreciation and thanks to you for your participation this week. I hope you found the sharing of information valuable, and we certainly appreciate hearing from you in your voice.
Thank you. It's a great learning opportunity as well. Thank you.
Okay, next I would like to call Mr. John H. Lamont to provide testimony, and this is our final testimony card submitted for the day, so I hope that we didn't miss anyone, but
First off, I'd like to thank the Indigenous peoples of this region for having us here, Mr. Co-Chairs, members of the panel, supporting staff and audience. My name is John Lamont, Agwayak and Yupik. I'm from the mouth of the Yukon River. I'm the culprit. I'm the commercial fisherman. I've been there commercial fishing since 1967. I come to meetings in both sides of our use area of the Yukon, and I hear a lot of the times it's finger pointing. It's not our job to finger point. I try not to judge others, but it's really difficult when, since 1967, I've only known the traditional Chinook salmon commercial fishery. We used to fish June 1 to June 30th, 5 days a week, a 72-hour and a 48-hour fishing period. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game over the years had conservatively managed our fishery. They reduced it to 248, then 36, 48, 236, on down to 2001 when I didn't fish. I haven't commercial fished for Chinook salmon since 2001. I may have fished other salmon species and sold, incidentally, Chinook salmon. But that year, 2001, I understood clearly. I believe it's when the panel was just pulling their agreement together, that conservation was the #1 issue. And so I didn't mind it. I was sharing with others further up the river. When I was young, I had no idea. I just thought the kings were coming at the mouth and I can get as many as I wanted. If I got 1,000 kings, boy, and sold them commercially, I was getting 17 cents a pound then. Then later on, I got more up in the grounds of, $5 a pound for that species. That's the first thing. The second point is our subsistence harvest on the lower Yukon. And I'm specifically talking about Y1, which is the first 40 miles of the river, the 3 mouths, the north mouth, the south mouth, and the middle mouth. When the Alaska Department of Fish and Game managers state that subsistence fishery is relaxed, even at this meeting, to 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, it doesn't mean we go out there and fish that. Historically, subsistence fishing was allowed 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, forever. Our people would go out and harvest what they need in one time. They won't piecemeal it. They'd harvest it and they'd smoke it, and when it was done, it was done. Now, as the department in our area started managing the fishery, where subsistence take or personal use take was limited in time, it really started putting an impact on our users and on the species. I really appreciate those who have testified before me today. I respect all you, and I want to bring up what Miss Andrews had brought up on the story about going to the store. That analogy was so related to what we're doing with our resource. When we used to harvest 7 days a week, or were allowed to harvest 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, we went out and got what we needed in a short period of time and went home and dealt with it. Now, with the 1 hour store opening, with the 1 18-hour window that we get in a week, everybody, if you're not working and you're not traveling, everyone goes out there and tries to harvest that species so they can put it away. And it's really difficult to do it that way. And we impact maybe one spawning area. It's so critical. I'm not a scientist or a biologist, but I've been coming to meetings for years where I start listening to these biologists' reports. When you have a spawning ground can carry this capacity, and how many, if you get too much up there, the return drops. It happens to different species. But when you deal with the department manages us, we don't manage the fishery, we manage the people. And when we're managed to a point where it's really restrictive, it's difficult and it's hard, and there's hardships. Just like going to the store, where if it was open twice a week, 1 hour a day, like Ms. Andrews had explained, that's difficult. And everyone wants, when you go to the shelf to look for that Dairy Gold butter and it's not there, it's all purchased already, it's difficult. Same with the king salmon. But anyways, you know, mining, or I guess natural mineral resource harvesting and tourism seems to be the Yukon's economic engine. Our economic engine, I can remember, has been commercial fishing. And I'm only talking for those at the mouth of the river. And I guess commercial fishing was, you know, have been or always have been our economic driver at the mouth since the early 1900s to about 2000. Now the government's transfer payments seem to drive our economy. Our people are self-sustaining people, and depending on the government is unhealthy. We as people all are dependent upon the salmon that our great Creator provides. Therefore, we have had and continue to have conservation as our guide. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. And with that, I don't have any further testimony cards, so we will be bringing our meeting to a close. So as part of our closing remarks, I'd like to give the opportunity, obviously, to panel members to provide some closing remarks. And start with, who would like to start with any closing remarks for panel members? Any volunteers? Andy Bassich, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. First of all, I really want to thank the people that came and testified. This was probably the best meeting in 20 years as far as testimony that I've seen. And it's what I took away from that is that, as I said in my testimony, I think we have a chance to create a new paradigm on the Yukon. No, I think you took a lot of heat in some areas, and managers took a lot of heat in some areas, and that's okay. That's a part of the process. And we all make mistakes, and we all do really well some days too. But one thing I do know after being on this panel for 20 years, this is something that everybody cares about, and everybody puts their all into it. And so I do want to thank the JTC. They are an invaluable part of this process. And I believe what a lot of the testimony said, it's about the people, but it's also about the numbers. It's both. And so we have to find a way to work with both of those together. And I want to thank the people of Whitehorse and the KWACH'AN for allowing us to be here. This is by far the most beautiful place for us to have meetings over here in Canada, and I always look forward to coming back and walking around this beautiful building. So thank you very much, and I felt it was a good meeting. I'm walking away feeling good. Thank you.
Closing remarks, panel members. Sven Palken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the KWACH'AN people for allowing us to be here. It's my second, third, maybe fourth time being in Whitehorse, and it's a beautiful place. I'd also like to thank JTC for all the work they've done since I've been on even as an alternate panel member. Understand that the amount of work that they put in for the panel ourselves here. Ask all the tough questions and hopefully try to make it easier for us to work on what we need to do as far as the projects go. Also, lastly, I thank Fred Bew for all his experience in working on fisheries issues. I hate to see him leave, but I wish you luck in the future here. Lastly, I kind of want to go back to what Dennis Zimmerman had said earlier about earlier this afternoon. He had asked the question, what does a treaty mean? And I'd like to maybe hopefully bring a little bit of perspective from, I guess, the Alaska Native side. There are similarities between U.S. and Canada as far as the indigenous people go we live off the land, and that's basically what we live doing. I know in Canada they're referred to as First Nations. In Alaska, we're referred to as tribes. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just the way they are, by how the different governments are, for each country. And I understand that in Canada, at least here in the First Nations, you have your treaty rights and all that as far as allowing yourselves to govern yourselves, and that's good that you have that. In Alaska, we don't have any. The Native people don't have any treaties with the government. We are, and I'm sure Rhonda would back me up on this. We do have this thing called federally recognized tribes for Alaska Natives. When we don't have the treaty rights like the lower 48 Indians do. So when Dennis Zimmerman was asking if we understand what treaties are, I think we do. We just don't have that frame of reference for the natives in Alaska. And I just bring it up just to kind of maybe shed some light on some things. I know there was talk of we need better communication. Hopefully this will be just one little bit of communication that's traded back and forth. So we do have if you ask someone like where I'm from, if we understand that the Yukon River panel, there's this treaty that the U.S. government allows this escapement into Canada by treaty. The Department of Fish and Game manages that as part of the treaty. The locals down there, they don't really have that terminology. That's not really used. What we do have are the laws that the department does use to manage the treaty itself. So, kind of going back to what Dennis Zimmerman was asking, local folks down there might not use that term or realize that what the department is managing for is for the treaty. All the folks know is it's the escapement goal that they're working towards. So folks down there do realize that there is this escapement goal, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more. There's this escapement goal that the department is managing for, although we might not understand it as a treaty right that folks up here in Canada would understand treaty rights. I just wanted to bring that up. Hopefully that'll kind of help with this little communications that we've talked about here last few days here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sven. Rhonda Pitka, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for your amazing testimony this week. It's definitely been some of the best. I've definitely not been here as long as some people, but it's been some of the best participation that I've seen yet. I'd like to thank the Intertribal Fish Commission for their attendance at this meeting, and I'd also like to thank the Tanana Chiefs Conference for sending their Vice President, Charlene Stern. This is, to the first of my knowledge, the first time that the Vice President of Tanana Chiefs Conference has come to this meeting, and that really points to an investment by the Tanana Chiefs Conference in this process and an ability to partner. Our leadership is incredibly busy right now on the Alaska side, and I appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness that Dr. Stern has put into her testimony and her meetings with the First Nations people. I definitely appreciate that. I'd like to thank the Kwanlin Dun and the KWACH'AN for having us on their shared territory, especially in this beautiful space. And I'd also like to thank the Canadian side for always hosting us in such a great manner and for not having any earthquakes. It's great. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. My other leadership that was here is Chief Charlie Green of Loudon. it's been pretty rare to get my leadership to come to these proceedings because it seems oftentimes that we make decisions behind closed doors with no input from them. So it makes it difficult for me to put forward the case that, you know, we still need to be in the room. Sven mentioned the lack of treaties on the Alaska side. So as a chief and an Indigenous person, when we talk about treaty rights, I take it very seriously. I also take very seriously my grandmother's teachings. Elsie Pitka objected pretty strenuously when the tribes put down the moratorium in 2014. When we told her that we weren't gonna fish, she told me that if I ever allowed that again, that she would string me up outside. I definitely believe my grandmother. So I think finding other avenues of management would be in my best interests. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rhonda. Panel member Alvon Finster, and then.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I would like to echo the appreciation for the KWACH'AN done for the space they provided for us, and also the KWACH'AN, the people that I grew up with, on whom's land that we are meeting. I've never seen such a wide variety of people coming from across the watershed in the Alaska and in the Yukon as we have at this meeting right here. And I think that their input will very much be, is very much appreciated and will be considered over time. I hope that next December's meeting we're much, much happier because we'll have both full escapement and a full harvest share. So that's something to look forward to for next year. Thank you so much.
Carl Sidney, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I just want to thank the public and especially all the people that testified. It takes a lot of nerve to get up there and say what you have to say, but you have to do it on behalf of the salmon and the animals that depend on the salmon, the eagles, the bears, the water, the environment, the trees. Nobody ever speaks for those. So that's where I come from, and that's where some of the testifiers come from also. I just want to reiterate what I said, you know, about having an abundance of salmon that come into the mouth. Just because it comes in at a high number, it doesn't mean that we're out of the bush. We still have a long, long ways to go to be able to have the salmon that we once had. And only the Creator knows if we're going to ever get there. And I think by getting there, we have to listen to what those people said. You know, the First Nations Fisheries Commission that testified and that gathered here the days before this gathering, I want to say a special thank you to them for doing what they've done. And we have to listen to what they have to present because they are the people that depend on this fishery. They've requested that we incorporate traditional knowledge into our JTC, something that I have said all along, and nobody seems to listen. I don't know what the problem is with having an advisor, somebody in advisory role, incorporating traditional knowledge into those recommendations that come from the JTC. We have to listen to that and pay attention to that. The meetings in the communities, I've said that all along, you know, why do we have to continue to pour money into communities that are already rich? This was supposed to be for the people, this Yukon River Salmon Agreement. Let's look at having some of these meetings in the communities, like I've always said. We had one in Teslin. Ragnar still talks about it yet. He tried to say that I scared him on a sled. I kind of doubt that. But I want to say especially a special thanks to Kwalen Dunn and TAAN for hosting us and letting us use this beautiful building. And I know some other First Nations that have beautiful buildings in their communities that we could host these meetings. I want to thank you, co-chairs, for, Old Crow's just building one. I see that, Darius. I want to thank you, co-chairs, for doing a fine job, keeping us on time, and I want to say a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to my friends all along the Yukon River. Thank you for coming and safe travels home. Gwitchin.
Thank you, Carl. Panel member Fred Bew, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you, everybody. The community Whitehorse, the people of Whitehorse, the people of Yukon territories. It's a really good deal that we're able to come here and be welcomed in such a way. It's humbling. I appreciate it. Thank you to the Alaska delegation, many of those who traveled a long ways. For me, as a federal representative, I hope that you've learned and come away with some new knowledge, some new information to take back. I think my message is, yes, you're always welcome at these meetings. In fact, we're always seeking ways to encourage people to come. I know it is a big inconvenience. We'll work at trying to find ways to do it, but everybody is always welcome. The entire public, anybody with any interest is welcome. Take that message back, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Panel member Ragnar Ahlstrom, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I was thinking of a couple of highlights of the trip that makes this a memorable trip. First is sitting by Carl Sidney. You know, over the last 20 or 30 years, Carl and I have sat most of the time on the different side of the fence. And we've testified against each other, or argued against each other, but I consider him a friend. And that's occurred, you know, over the last 20 or 30 years. Another highlight of the trip was meeting a young lady from Atlin, Samara. It's really good to see young people in the audience. That is a highlight. And finally, I think Miss Tiffany Andrew, her testimony, I was so proud to be from Lucknock. Her testimony was more than anything I could say. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ragnar. Looking around the table. Oh, go ahead, James McDonald. And Fred, I think you've got your mic on. Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to be brief. So, in my First Nation, we are a matrilineal heritage, which is to say the women are in positions of power. They more or less control decisions that shape how things are to be, should be, and so on and so forth. So I guess I just want to take a moment to recognize all the women and girls who have provided their testimony and who have demonstrated leadership over the past couple of days. I can think of many, including Miss Andrew, whose testimony I found nothing short of elegant. It was powerful, meaningful, and something that I can't even describe. It was just utterly amazing. So I just want to thank you for that. And I guess I would just observe that while you're not sitting at the table, you are very much affecting change in a leadership capacity, and I'm hopeful there will be space at this table for you in the future.
Further closing remarks? Harvey Jessup.
Thanks, Coach. I just want to thank everyone for coming, and I'm fairly new at this, but been to Anchorage a few times now, and I was always impressed that the Yukon testimony outweighed the Alaska testimony manyfold. And I often wondered, where were the Alaskans? And I saw that they love Whitehorse. So they came here in many numbers, and we heard some pretty powerful testimony from folks on the other side of the border, downriver, and I for one, really appreciated it. And I just want to say I didn't hear any suggestion, idea that was not achievable. I think what I did hear was an invitation, an inclusion, and I think as a panel we should really give that serious consideration, and I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and safe travels home. Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chair. Oh, sorry.
No.
Yep. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge the TAAN KWACH'AN Council and the Kwantlen for us meeting on their traditional territories. I wanted to, there was a lot of great comments mentioned by both colleagues in Alaska and in Canada. I guess, rather than list all the things we heard, I sincerely believe we did hear and saw and acknowledge what was said today. And I guess it's just we're processing. And I always like to bring a human element to this because I think the human element is lacking from these meetings quite often. And I'm slightly uncomfortable. There's a lot of things that I'm processing, and I think that's a good sign because it means perhaps there's change and we're trying to change, and I think that's a good place to be. Domestically, we have a lot of work to do. Internationally, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do to make the panel at an international scale relevant in local communities and ensure that we are, in fact, serving those that are actually fishing along the river. And I guess one thing I wanted to say is, it's a message, I guess, to a lot of the structures we have within this panel is, I think it's okay not to have the answers. I think we try to fill the space with a lot of data, a lot of science, and we have a lot of theories that we're trying to. And as a scientist myself, I can understand that. But I think we need to ask for help. And I think there's certain areas where we just don't have the answers, and it's okay not to have the answers. And I think people, if we open our doors, people are opening theirs, I think we'll find that common ground. Thank you. And thank you all for coming and your testimony.
Thank you, Dennis. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I guess what comes to mind is that anything that I would have to say as a co-chair or so on and so forth seems inadequate compared to all the commentary and testimony, not just from our panel members, but also from everybody that came to participate in this meeting and give their heartfelt testimony and experience. So I want to thank all of those individuals, panel members, as well as everyone. I want to thank the First Nations communities of the Yukon for setting the example and the standard of engagement consistently year after year. What Harvey mentioned with respect to even coming to Anchorage, Alaska, in that regard. It's recognizing that it can be more difficult sometimes for our Alaskan stakeholders, tribal members, fishers throughout the Yukon River drainage to make it to meetings. Even just traveling out of their communities can be thousands and thousands of dollars alone. So I do want to acknowledge and recognize the efforts of the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission to bring a large contingent of Alaskan stakeholders from throughout the Yukon River drainage, from the lower river all the way up towards the border and the Yukon Flats within Alaska. I hope to see that continue to improve to whatever extent that we as a U.S. section can help to facilitate that. We certainly will focus on that. I hope that we do see more robust and invaluable testimony from our Alaskan stakeholders, as well as our Yukon stakeholders as well. Thank you very much for the always warm welcome and hospitality that we receive here in Whitehorse. It sounds cliche at this point, but it is something that we look forward to coming here to Yukon. Look forward to any potential future meetings in other locations within the Yukon as well. We are absolutely going to be taking that very seriously in Alaska. The recommendations that are being made, try and overcome any potential logistical hurdles that we may encounter in that regard. I can't make any promises at this point, at least not for April, but we are going to make a concerted effort to try and make that happen. And I'd look forward to maybe seeing something similar on the Yukon side as well, if it's possible. Thank you again very much for all the good testimony, all the good commentary, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again in April. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and Mr. Carlson.
If I could, you don't mind if I, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say a special thank you to those people that do the audio and the video, and Louise. I think you guys do an awesome job. Thank you.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't provide the opportunity for Madam Alternate Co-Chair closing remarks.
I would just like to add my thanks, again, first to the First Nations communities who welcomed us and hosted us and taught us. And I'm really heartened to hear the testimony and the strength of that testimony and the various themes that we all listen to and I hope take to heart about, like Dennis, my science is with the people, and I think it's where we start and it is where we finish. And so I would just like to thank everybody here who took the time to share your knowledge and to share your ideas and your thoughts, because every single one of them was amazing. Thank you.
And I guess to conclude, I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to the TAAN and the KWACH'AN people. And beyond that, I do want to recognize that through our Yukon River panel process, we don't always adhere to the local cultural protocols, and we haven't always respected the local codes of conduct. And for any missteps have occurred, there was certainly no offense or intends to exclude anyone, as we've discussed already here in our closing remarks, but I will sincerely apologize for any offense that may have been taken with respect to how we've done business in the past or how we did business during these meetings. But importantly, I think that what we can recognize is that as a panel, we can do better. And I think hearing from panel members, you have a commitment that we will do better. And so with that, I'd like to extend our thanks and appreciation to all of the Alaskan tribal organizations and representatives that participated, the respective chiefs, and also representatives from Yukon First Nations and First Nation government chiefs. It's very important to have your participation in this process, and we appreciate your patience and your willingness to contribute and engage. Finally, I'd like to thank our U.S. and Canadian delegations and representatives. Your time and commitment to this process is sincerely appreciated, and I know most of you travel a very long way and spend a long time away from your families in order to contribute to this process, so that is sincerely appreciated. And then finally, in closing, Angus and Victor and your teams at your team at the Pacific Salmon Commission sincerely appreciate your assistance. Our meetings would not be what they are without you. And then our assistants from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Louise and Amy, and our sound team, and those that participated online thanks to their efforts to enable us to stream these meetings and hopefully reach a broader audience. And finally, I guess with the conclusion of this meeting, we bid farewell and thanks to Fred. And we hope that with our ability to stream online, you'll be watching next time. So with that, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing all of you again very soon in the new year. Thank you.